Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. For the next 40 minutes, we will focus on the educational context. We will look at how the pandemic impacted what we do to support English language learners and their families in schools. I'm Alla Gonzalez Del Castillo, and I'm leading the ESOL program in St. Louis Public Schools District. And this afternoon, I will share with you some of the adjustments that we had to make as a result of COVID, as well as highlight some innovative approaches we took to ensure we address those new needs that our families have, the needs that emerged because of the pandemic. So today's session will cover the following areas. First, changes within the ESOL office space, access to learning and access to supports. We will also talk about virtual and hybrid instruction, virtual ELL family engagement, and discuss language access supports. Here is some context for you to help you situate our program within the educational landscape in the St. Louis area. So our ESOL program supports all English language learners in all St. Louis public schools, which is about 2,500 students in more than 60 city schools. Our students collectively represent over 60 countries and speak more than 50 world's languages. And about 70% of our English language learners are receiving services. What that means is that they require intentional language development support in order to make progress in learning English, in order to achieve proficiency in English, and in order to show mastery in all content area disciplines. While we support English language learners in more than 60 district schools, 18 of our schools have a high percentage of English language learners. We internally refer to these schools as ELL centers. Many of you may know our newcomer centers, Nahid Chapman New American Academy for kindergarten through 8th grade and Nahid Chapman New American Academy for 9th and 10th grade. These are two of our 18 ESOL Center schools. All students in these two schools are English language learners, and they're all newcomers. That's why they're newcomer centers. That's because they have been in the US for less than 2 years, and they need a lot of support learning English and learning content. Speaking about support, over 60 teachers in our district are dedicated to language development, and these are our ESOL teachers. Two key considerations to keep in mind as we talk about the impact of the pandemic. One, as part of the Council of Great City Schools, our program has been collaborating with ELL programs in all major metropolitan areas to work on ensuring adequate support for English language learners and their families during the pandemic. Through such collaboration, 3 areas of need emerged: access to resources, and this includes resources related to health and financial well-being of our ELL families, the need to support mental health and socio-emotional development of our students, and of course, the need to support ELL's learning. This area addresses the need around teaching and learning, as well as access to learning, that is, access to technology that then leads to learning. The second component we focused on during the pandemic is something our program continuously looks at. It's that concept of organizational ambidexterity. That is our ability to adjust, make changes to our existing practices, and innovating, developing new ideas and new practices at the same time. Because of COVID, some things within our program had to change. We had to adapt and adjust. But we also have an opportunity to innovate to address new needs of our students, new needs of our families. So all ELLs in our district are typically welcomed at the ESOL office for any need they may have, whether it's enrollment of new students, language screening, help with filling out school documents and forms, help understanding communications sent from their child's school, help connecting with their child's school, help with resources, and so on. All of that is provided through the ESOL office for the district. With the pandemic, our office had to adjust and see families only by appointments. We are limiting the number of individuals who can come in and try to address as many issues and problems that our families might have over the phone or Zoom to minimize the time they have to spend in the actual office space. When families do come in for appointments, we are following our district protocol with health screening and disinfecting, wearing masks, and social distancing. We strategically had to arrange space within our office to allow for various language groups to have dedicated conference spaces and to allow for social distancing. So that does not help us address the disinfecting protocols, but also just in case for any contact tracing, that will be extremely helpful. So here you see some signs that are all throughout campus and in our office, but also throughout all district schools that we post that are translated for our families to understand the information the district is communicating about these new protocols and new health screenings and new requirements. So we want to ensure that our ELL families are aware of these protocols so that they can too comply with them during the pandemic. So we also had to make adjustments in the way our students access learning and receive our supports. Our district moved to one-to-one devices for this school year with a drive-through device distribution that involved a lot of language access support to ensure families understand the process for distribution and are able to pick up the devices for their students. We are also, as a district, offer tech support with language access. So 2 services combined in one. So if our families call our help desk for the district, our help desk is equipped with strategies and resources to access interpreters, whether it's our district interpreters or the agencies that we collaborate with to ensure meaningful communication is happening during those tech troubleshooting. Our team also translated many step-by-step guides and how-to documents that support our families with online learning. So for example, we have a guide as to how to activate your hotspot, how to log into Teams, which is a platform we use for instruction. So all of that has been translated to ensure families and students have a way to really meaningfully access this information. Wellness checks is another strategy we implemented to adjust to new normal. Our teachers and staff have dedicated time they can spend to call families and talk about how they're feeling, check in if there are any needs the family may have. This effort was supported by our language access team as well to ensure that the communication with families is in the language they understand. Another important component is parent input. It is always important in our program, and there have been several opportunities for district families to provide input as far as their preferences for their child's learning for in-person or virtual when in-person option is available. We had to make some adjustments in this area as well to ensure that ELL families can meaningfully participate in this opportunity to share, in this opportunity to provide input. So our district language access team was making personalized phone calls to our ELL families to assist them with a survey completion and to answer any questions that family may have about options to continue to learn virtually or return to in-person learning. Another adjustment was the creation of our virtual space where all information for our ELL families is housed in one spot. So our ELL virtual learning website became this one-stop shop for our families. It includes translated documents, those how-to documents, links to multiple virtual learning resources that are arranged in the ELL parent-friendly way, and many more resources for families and our students. Here is an example of our ELL family directory. This is a new tool we developed as a result of the need that was created during the pandemic. This tool allows our staff members in all district schools to know detailed information about ELL families' communication preferences. So, what's the home language for the family? Does the family need an interpreter? Do we have a district interpreter for this language, or should staff member use a telephonic interpretation service? What are the mother's and father's communication preferences? What is oral versus written communication preference? This tool allows us to capture all of this detailed information that is so vital in meaningful communication with our families. It also allowed our staff to be much more intentional in their outreach efforts because they are now efficient and intentional with their communication with families. Our ESOL program has a pantry, which is typically it includes food and hygiene items for our families in need. So with the pandemic, we quickly realized that the number of families needing support with these basic needs increased drastically. Yet, in spring, our families could not come to our office and get the support because district offices were closed. So we saw this as an opportunity to innovate and turn our ELL pantry into a mobile ELL pantry. So we did porch deliveries to our ELL families. Our staff identified families in need, prepared the food box for them, included hygiene items and learning packets, and dropped the items off on the porch. Then we did a follow-up, and a language access team member, so an interpreter or a translator, called the family in their first language to let them know that they have some items on the porch from our program to pick up. So in this effort, we have been collaborating with Operation Food Search to be able to provide our families with food, and with multiple private donors and the support through the Rob Lee Foundation to allow us to provide hygiene items for our families. And you see on the screen that since March 2019, over 7,000 individuals, so that is our ELL students and their parents, received support with basic needs through our program. Now, what's interesting to note that some of our families need the support on a weekly basis. So first, we were doing the porch deliveries to them on a weekly basis. Now they're able to make an appointment and come and pick up the box from our office on a weekly basis. Whereas other families really reached out and utilized the support when they needed it the most. And that often was then our students' parents were out of a job. Our instruction for English language learners had to adjust quite a bit as well. So here you see multiple platforms we are using to ensure that we are able to support our students during virtual learning and during hybrid learning, to ensure that we continue to focus on our 4 key language development areas, which is speaking, listening, reading, and writing. And the trickiest part has been to make sure that our teachers embed opportunities for students to practice speaking. And as a follow-up to that, to be able to capture our students speaking for assessment of how are they doing in that area. So some of these programs have been extremely helpful in allowing us to not only provide our students with opportunities to develop all four language domains, but also with providing our staff with an opportunity to collect speaking samples, to collect reading samples from our students for assessment purposes so that we can see their growth. So another thing we developed, another opportunity to innovate that we saw in the area of instruction was this toolkit to support ELL teachers as well as classroom and content teachers. So to support their collaboration as they work together to ensure that language development supports are provided consistently to all of our students in the district in all schools. So here you see the sample ELL toolkit that allows teachers to differentiate and adapt content to ensure English language learners have access to that content regardless of the actual task at hand. And there are specific sort of tips embedded for virtual settings. So how to utilize some of these supports that are essential and critical supports for language development, and our teachers are familiar with them, but how do we utilize them consistently and very intentionally in the virtual environment? Here is another strategy that we saw as an opportunity to innovate and create something new in response to the new language development needs of our students. These are weekly choice boards that provide instructional activities that address four language domains. So we've noted those before: speaking, listening, reading, and writing. They can be embedded into virtual lessons, so they can become part of the team's lesson that our teachers conduct, or they can be used as a standalone asynchronous learning activity. So the clip you see on your slide is what parents and students can access through our virtual learning website for ELLs, where we started in April and we continue during this school year. We are adding one choice board every week for each of the grade level clusters that you see on your screen. And we have gotten really good feedback both from students and parents, because it is something that parents can easily support their students' learning. It's easy to access, it's predictable in terms of where to find this resource, and all the links are already embedded. So there is no need to hunt for passcode, access code to this, go to one platform to access something else. Our program typically hosts multiple parent events and activities to help ELL parents learn about the education system in the US, learn about our district in particular, and learn how they can support their child's learning, and what are some of the opportunities to engage in learning activities with their child or as a whole family. So because of the pandemic, we could not host these meetings in person. So we switched to hosting them via either Zoom, or we also use pre-recorded videos as a way to guide our students and families learning at home. So for some of the activities that required certain manipulatives, so items for students to work with, families could schedule an appointment, come to our office and pick up those items in anticipation of their participation in the activity. And then here are some of the events, more specifically, that we have conducted this year thus far. So ELL parent meetings, so far we hosted 2 of those. Both were done via Zoom, and the district translators and interpreters led the sessions in the parents' first language. We were quite concerned at first that our families would not log in or would not be able to participate in some of the interactive functions. But they proved us wrong, and they did an amazing job with the first meeting. And as many of you know, those who work with immigrant or refugee families, once one family is successful, they share it with their friends and extended family, and we got more people to participate next time. So our second parent session, we had more parents join us. We also hosted an ELL math hour. Our families were able to come to our office, and that's where I was mentioning earlier that they could come in and pick up some of the supplies. So in this case, it was manipulatives for math. And then our team pre-recorded video tutorials that guided students and families through that joint math learning experience in their first language. The college fair for English language learners and their families was another opportunity to innovate that we just had recently in early November. We developed a virtual space for colleges, universities, and trade schools to share information with our students. So post some information about their programs, cost, any specific requirements for students to be admitted. We then hosted a Zoom meeting to address any questions that our students might have. We also recapped some information about ways to support students through college, so financial aid and all of that, and talked about the requirements in the state of Missouri of what is it that you need to complete to be able to graduate, and then how should you be working on that so that you can then follow up and do your post-secondary choices. And then finally, students who participated in college and career fair had a chance to complete a Microsoft form to share their learning and their aspirations for the future. Okay, so language access support was another aspect of our work where we had to make some adjustments as a result of the pandemic. While we continue to provide the same key language access services, which is translation, interpretation, robocalls in multiple languages, and personalized phone calls, we transitioned our in-person interpretation to over the phone or language access support via Microsoft Teams and Zoom. Lately, our three-way phone call support became one of the most popular language access features with our district staff. So it enables any staff member, any teacher to interact via three-way call with the parent and have our interpreter on call to support their communication. During the pandemic, we have seen an increase in the use of language access supports in our districts as teachers and school staff overall increase the number of contacts with all families, not just ELLs. The number of times that they reached out to ELL families also increased. So the number of times they needed an interpreter or the member of our language access team to help support their communication increased drastically. Our language access team provided over 24,000 cases of language support last year. And just to put it in perspective, that was over 100% increase from a prior year. And just from the beginning of this school year, so August through October, we have already provided more than 8,000 cases of language support in our district. So as we continue to support our ELL students and families in St. Louis Public Schools, we will continue to focus on adjusting our practices to meet the needs of our families and exploring new opportunities to serve them based on the new needs that may be emerging. And I encourage you to check our website and leave us some feedback using the Let's Talk button. You can also share your feedback through chat, obviously, and we can move on to questions at this time. My contact information is on the screen if you would like to contact at a later time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that presentation. It does look like we have a couple of questions. I'd just like to remind everyone to make sure that your first and last name is in the chat to get credit for the CEUs. Also to place your questions in the Q&A function of the Zoom window, or you can also put that in the chat. And to kick off the Q&A session, we have one question that says, what was the percentage of African immigrant parents and families who attended the parent meeting?
So I don't know the percentage, but what I can tell you is that we host parent meetings in Spanish, Arabic, Vietnamese, Somali, Swahili. Those two groups of Swahili and Somali is what you are asking about. Can't recall the numbers, but I was actually leading a Somali group, and I started off with probably 5 parents during my first meeting. A couple of them were just sort of coming in a little late. That is something that we are still working with our families on. But then the second time, we had a whole lot more parents attending. And again, don't have the numbers with me, but that was across all of our language groups. So that was just for, not just for our Somali and Swahili families, but for all of our language groups. Once parents felt like it's really still a safe zone, but it's just virtual, they were comfortable to talk within their community, and it just seemed like they were bringing more and more people to the meetings.
Awesome, thank you. Another question is, who do you use for the phone interpretation?
So we use 2 vendors this year, and I think just so that we can sort of stay, in compliance with our district protocols of who we have contracts with. I won't disclose the vendors, but I do know that over the years, we have worked with a couple of language access providers in the areas, and we have always had great support because we do, as I mentioned earlier, we do have more than 50 languages in our program. Our district language access team covers 80% of our language access need. So we have our in-house interpreters for Spanish, Arabic, Vietnamese, Somali, Swahili, and Bosnian. But then we still have that 20% of low incidence languages, so less in terms of the number of speakers for the language. But it doesn't mean that these students and families don't have the need for support. So this is where our contractual services with language access agencies in the area through that telephonic interpretation really helped us to ensure that we as a district meet the needs of all of our English language learners and families, regardless of the language. And we are able and ready to serve all of them at all times.
Great, thank you. There's a request if you can put your contact information in the chat.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Alrighty, thanks. And then we have one other question. Feel free to send in your questions using the Q&A function again. One question in the Q&A box, it says, what program additions would you like to see? For example, funding, staff, language skills, etc.
Wow, this is a great question because as I mentioned, we are always, not just through the pandemic, but always focused on two things. What do we need to do to improve current practices, and what do we need to do to innovate, to bring us to the next level? How do we improve some of the services by adding some things that are completely brand new in terms of support? So I think this is a great opportunity to maybe highlight some of the other things that we have that were not part of the presentation, but it's really an example of how we go an extra mile sometimes to different funders through grants to bring in new programs for our families. So within our office, we have a bilingual parent library, which currently houses over 700 titles, and we carry 5 copies of each book, and we have books in 7 different languages. So we have Arabic, Spanish, Somali, Swahili, Swahili, Vietnamese, and Nepali, and English. So the creation of that library is a joint effort of our team because we wrote grants to get funding for it. So we had this idea, but of course, with anything that's sort of extra or new or innovative, you have to go out and look for that funding that will help you support that. So that particular idea was supported. The first year was about 4 years ago, where we started off with just a few books in each of these languages. And over the years, we have been able to get additional funding through small grants, through different agencies in the St. Louis area, and expand our library to what it is now, which is over 700 titles. We have gotten to the point that now I think we bought all the books that are available in these languages on Amazon or on Language Lizard, those typical sort of places where you would shop for bilingual books. We have also, with the feedback from our parents, we realized that providing books alone may not be ideal for some of them. So we then explored the idea of having sort of books on tape, books on CD, and looked at how we can secure some of these for our collection. Many of our Somali speakers really enjoyed that new addition, as well as several of our Spanish speakers. And to further support them with access to these books with CDs or books with tape or on tape, we also provide a boombox that families can check out from our office while they're using that resource. So some of the other items that we recently added to our collection was sort of like this new innovative thing that kind of looks like an iPod. So a lot of our older students really like, it's the same concept as the book on tape, but it's a book on the iPad. And older students really enjoy using that experience. So I guess to come back to your question, we are always looking for ways to find funding to support some of our ideas that bring additional programming or additional opportunities for our students and families.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. It looks like this will be our last question as we have 5 minutes left. It says, based on your observations, has parents or families' involvement improved, stayed the same, or gotten worse during the pandemic?
Well, I would say our family involvement within our program probably improved, just because we got more people reaching out to our families. So our office staff has always had a really good connection. So our translators, interpreters have a really good connection. They have established trust with our families. But during the pandemic, because the district really emphasized those wellness checks, those connections with families for teachers, we have seen more teachers reach out to families and really becoming more involved with the family than before. And we have seen that increase through that increased need for language access, which that it creates something that we need to make sure that we are able to sustain and address that need, so meet that language access need. So that's sort of like a challenge for us. At the same time, it's an opportunity for us to celebrate because more students are getting in touch with their teachers, because more teachers are now involved in connections with families. So I would say it increased just because, I mean, looking at our number of language access support cases alone, 24,000, which is more than 100% increase from the prior year. And all of our language access supports are supporting some type of communication with school, whether it's a teacher or a counselor, a principal, a social worker. So I think it has increased.
Awesome, thank you. So there is actually one more question as we have a
Sure.
few more minutes. It says, could you identify which programs, applications you used have been most effective in terms of accessibility and ease of use when teaching families new technology?
Okay, well, I would actually start by mentioning that we have developed a course for our families that is a computer literacy class. It's a series of 10 classes that we designed specifically for our families. And it's taking them from computer basics, because we have to start and make the course available to every one of our families. And some of them have never worked with a computer, have never touched it. So, and it's taking them through working with Word documents, working with Excel, working with online forms, finding information online. And in each of these lessons, we connect them to our district. So for example, when we teach them how to fill out online forms, we link that knowledge to our magnet school applications or our district applications for early childhood, because these are examples of online forms. So I think, and over the years, we have had a lot of our parents participate in those family or parent computer literacy classes that we have developed. And that has been really the best way for us to encourage families to become comfortable with technology and feel a whole lot better about assisting their students with learning. Now, in terms of sort of platforms or programs, I think one that I would like to mention is Simbaloo. It's not a program to teach the language or to teach any certain skill, yet it is critical in terms of helping us organize multiple resources in an ELL parent-friendly way. So if you have a chance to go to our district website, and I can put that in the chat, we do have our ELL Simbaloo under our parents section. And it is a really just easy way to help parents navigate through all of the programs that students may be using at school, whether it's virtual school or in person, and all the programs and resources that we curate for them.